So we were talking about different techniques and activities that you can help support if you're caring for someone. So did you want to kind of elaborate a bit on
yes,
that?
I think it's potentially very helpful for a carer to know about some of the typical techniques which a therapist might invite the client to work on, just so they know about these things and are not surprised by them, but also because some of them actually the carer can participate in, either directly or in parallel, and that makes it often more effective, and it's a nice way of sharing that experience. So there are those. If we think about one of the most common techniques in therapy, which is keeping a journal or a log, and it's sometimes worthwhile just distinguishing those two things. A journal might be an invitation from the therapist to keep a kind of narrative account of each day about the thoughts and feelings and what ideas the individual might have. And
so more like a diary?
More like a diary, absolutely. Okay. And that's beneficial because some of these thoughts can be lost if you're not at your best. If you have a nice experience somewhere, later on when you're feeling a bit down, you might not be able to access that memory as quickly, and the negative thoughts rush in and take over. And it's quite therapeutic, it's quite unburdening to be able to write such a thing, very cathartic, and that's great. The other technique, which is very similar but has a slightly different approach and aim, is a simple log, where an individual would be encouraged by the therapist to keep a kind of a grid of activities, and it might be Monday 9 o'clock, got out of bed, had a cup of tea, felt awful. Right? Okay. So little things like that. Tuesday 5 o'clock, watched a video of my grandson's first day at school, felt really, really happy. Right? Little things like that. And all the bits, mixed bits and neutral bits in between. The purpose of that approach is to have a kind of almost a real-time record of the ebb and flow of the mood, and to link that to certain activities, either things that have happened to the individual or things that they have decided to do. Because one of the dangers when someone is depressed in particular is that the memories of unhappiness and the awareness of threats or disappointments just crowds their consciousness and doesn't let the other things have any sort of place at all. Okay. Part of it is about recognising that whatever it was that made you depressed in the first place, the thing that might be hampering your recovery is the way in which your mind is blocking out all the rays of hope and sunshine, and to give it a more balanced treatment. It's not about replacing a negative, pessimistic train of thought with a happy-go-lucky, Pollyanna, everything's wonderful train of thought, just take one out. You can't do that and it doesn't help. It's about recognising that life has nice bits, unhappy bits, and bits that are just neutral, right? To have that recognition and to own it, to recognise it in your own life, is such a powerful antidote to a purely negative orientation. So the therapist might ask your loved one to keep a journal of narrative thoughts, a little diary, and or a log of incidents and their ratings at the time. Okay. Those are common ones. How can you help? You can help by reminding them to fill it in. You can say how you're finding the activity, particularly the journal, the narrative journal. Ask them, was there anything interesting that you put in today? Not to pry, but to give them a chance to talk more about it. Particularly the nicer memories, because the more they can reprocess and consolidate those memories, the easier it will be for them to access it when they're under pressure, so they get a more balanced reaction to situations. Come back to that. And just more generally to show an interest and to validate the therapeutic process. If you're asking about it, it gives it more legitimacy, it shows that you care and you think this is something that is worth doing.
And one of the things we talked about is co-journaling, so you kept your own journal and say, look, this might help from my perspective.
Definitely.
Saturday seemed to be a really good day, Sunday seemed to have quite a lot of energy. We went for a nice walk in the park on a Sunday.
Absolutely. Okay. And the other part of co-journaling is to jointly author a single journal, which is a tricky one. But
Okay.
if the best outcome is the individual is able to record the thoughts in whatever format by themselves, more or less as it happens,
Yeah.
and they feel happy with that. If they're struggling, you can play a role in saying, well, Saturday morning, what's your entry for that? Or they might say, Saturday morning, I don't know what to write down, I can't remember.
Mm.
Well, you know, we went to that new coffee shop at the corner in town, and you tried to have the hazelnut coffee you never had before, you really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, no, you mentioned, yeah, so write that down. Yeah. So you can help trigger, yeah? You don't have to do it for them, but where there are gaps, you can have a little bit.
Okay.
Code journaling is also something which is powerful. Just got to be careful that your journal isn't more detailed and rich and other person think that's the benchmark. To generally do it together is very powerful. So there's that sort of thing. Something which is particularly important for helping individuals recover from depression, as we've mentioned, is activity, to be active. Now, there's a technique called activity scheduling, and the general notion of behavioural activation, but activity scheduling, this idea that if you are to encourage people to be active, to do things, it might be staying in the house and doing knitting or games or whatever, it might be going out. If you can get them to schedule it specifically, 7 o'clock on Thursday, I'm going to go to the cinema. Not, I should go to the cinema soon, or I'll go to the cinema this week. Too vague. The more specific, the better. And you can help them identify a time when they will do it. Something.
So why does that work better? Why does it work better to go? I'm going to go to the cinema on Tuesday at 7 rather than I want to go to the cinema soon?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, the human mind is very good at saying in moments of enthusiasm, yep, I'm going to do it. Okay. Less good at following it through. And also, it's kind of, we're not quite sure what we've promised ourselves. If we say, I'm going to do that thing, it's good, that would be a good thing to do, go to the cinema. It's not clear what we've committed to, in as much as you can't generally go to the cinema. You go to the cinema at a specific time. So it's trying to get a better match between your commitment and the thing that is the action. Right? Okay. It's to try, and again, advanced techniques. The therapist, if the individual is struggling, saying, can you imagine yourself going to the cinema? Talk me through what that might be. Or even, let's imagine you at home at 5:30 and you've got in your diary going to the cinema this evening, 7 o'clock. Can you imagine yourself maybe having second thoughts or maybe thinking, actually there's nothing on, just little thoughts that maybe you won't do it? Now you imagine yourself dealing with those thoughts. Yeah? Okay. So a really skilled counsellor, a really skilled therapist will help the client inoculate themselves against non-performance. Right. And it's a lot easier to do that if you're inoculating them against not doing something specific rather than not doing something vague. Okay, that's really helpful. It's a great question. That's why we do it the way we do. Okay, so there's that. Now, to put another layer on that, again, Podesky's really powerful on this. She points out that it's not just activities in general. The research says, yes, it almost doesn't matter. Some activity that you've not been doing, commit to it, do it, and then you know you've done it. That's a good thing. But actually, research shows that 4 types of activities are particularly powerful for helping people with depression. And I use the acronym PAVE, P-A-V-E, to help me remember and to help my clients remember about these things. So you would schedule the coming week on the diary, and you would try and identify P, one thing you've been procrastinating about or putting off, maybe opening a bill, maybe going to the dentist, maybe something you've been putting off, phoning your mum, whatever. Right. So you schedule it down, something that would count as doing something you've been putting off. Right. That's P. A is for an achievement, something which, if you were to tell someone about it, they would say, "Gosh, good for you. That's an achievement." Okay. Good. Now we're not talking about, writing a Nobel Prize winning proposition for peace.
But it could be going to the park, making a phone call, to the cinema.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it would be, but something that's that you maybe in the past tried and didn't succeed at. Okay. Something which someone says, you would be good at that, and you think, oh no, I won't give it a go. Or it might even just be a personal best, right? So, for example, if someone enjoys walking but don't do it as much as they did, and you've got them on a roll about they're going for a walk almost every other day. You say, well, how long is your walk around the park? They say it's about 1.5 miles. Great. Is there a way you could extend that and make it a 2-mile walk? So that'd be the longest walk they've done. And they say, oh yeah, I could actually turn left at the cafe, not right. And that's great. So that would be a small A achievement. In other words, they now have a new personal best in terms of walking. So it could be as modest as that. The V is something that you value. It's doing something in line with your values that you haven't done recently or you don't normally do. Again, this is not about chaining yourself to the walls of a company you don't like. It could be, but don't mean that. But, so just examples that I've encouraged people in the past. Some people have charities they used to give money to, and they just haven't bothered, but they've not changed their view. So just to make a small donation is one thing. Another thing that more and more people, particularly young people, are keen on is volunteering. And you can encourage them to not do volunteering. You wouldn't want to encourage anyone to do anything specifically, but you say, well, you could at Christmas time help out with this charity for a couple of weeks if you think that's appropriate. Try and find out something more about it, perhaps. So that's a V for something in line with your values. Why? Because when we get depressed or we're distracted by anxiety, one of the first things our mind does, in a way, is start to jettison what it thinks are luxuries. And doing things in line with our values just seems to be a little bit too much of a long-term, take it or leave it optional thing. Right now, our mind is thinking we're in danger, we're in threat, it's a dangerous world, there's no particular way forward that I can see. I need to button down I need to belt down the hatches and make sure that I look after myself and be very risk averse. That's kind of the mental dynamic of our protective biological systems sometimes. So one of the first casualties of that is losing touch with things that we used to care about in general, abstract things we used to care about. So doing something in the week that's about your values. Just one small thing, it might be even as simple as watching a YouTube video about a charity that I used to make donations to. I don't know what they're currently doing in this part of the world. I want to find out. Something very clear about that. And then E is for something you enjoy. People who are depressed because they're lowering their activity, amongst much else, deprive themselves of doing things that they used to enjoy. So if you can activity schedule something which the individual enjoys, if they schedule it for themselves, that can be very powerful. And you just need to be a little bit of inoculation here. You don't want the individual thinking that the activity will be as enjoyable as it used to be when they were really in good mental health. So maybe the person played tennis 5 years ago and they really, really enjoyed it and was quite good at it. You just need to look, it will not be.
It may not feel the same, but at least you're doing something.
And then you get into the numbers and say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the happiest you could feel and 1's the worst you could feel, how enjoyable do you think going to tennis night at the club or at your gym next week would be? They say maybe a 4. Something like that. How was it 5 years ago? Oh, well, 8, 9, I really enjoyed it. Okay. So they go, and it's not an 8 or 9, but it's not a 4 either, it's probably a 6. And it's just that little gap saying, well, look, you underestimated how much you would enjoy it, didn't you? Yeah. What does that tell you about your judgments about activities?
So do you think one of the roles of the carer then is if the other person's been given an exercise, helping them think, what are the procrastinations, what are the values? So almost coming up with activities, then possibly doing those activities together.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really a great way in. Because if you're depressed in particular, to change from being quite activity averse to activity active, maybe it does need someone to help to hold your hand a little bit. Going to a tennis club on your own. Just an example of tennis. If you go with a partner, it's easier to get something going, I guess. So the activity scheduling is very common in treating depression, and it's a very, very positive and straightforward way for a partner or a carer to get involved in. So that's why your loved one might come home with a sheet with lots of little coloured bits. So there's that. Other activities which, if a person is anxious, generally suffering from general anxiety disorder or similar, is the therapist will try and help the individual focus on some of their beliefs about worrying.
Okay.
So there are both negative and positive beliefs about worrying that are really myths to some extent. Now, we won't go through them all, but one of the big mistakes that people make is thinking that worrying is uncontrollable.
Okay.
Yeah? And that can be very distressing. It might be, you're worried about the kids, you're worried about your job, you're worried about finding money for the balance of the holiday you've paid the deposit for, and all those things are stressful. But it kind of jumps into severe mental health issue and a genuine disorder when the person starts to feel as though the worrying itself seems to be all over me. I'm suffocating from this worrying. Okay? I'm just worrying all the time. So one of the things that drives that is the idea that worrying is uncontrollable. So people then decide, well, there's no point trying to control it.
Because I can't do anything about
it. Absolutely.
Okay.
But also means, oh my God, I'm going to be like this forever. And both those things are false. And the way to deal with it, one way of dealing with it, is to postpone the worry.
Okay.
Yeah? Rather than completely trying to ignore it, because it'll come back, or try to, think it out in a very detailed way every time you have a thought popping into your head.
And is that technique, which I think we talked about earlier, where you say, okay, well, let's not worry about it now, let's worry about it at 6 p.m. tomorrow or 7 p.m. on Tuesday?
Yeah, absolutely. And that postponement of worry is very powerful. And when you work with kids, though I don't work with young people so much now, you can literally have a worry box and say, if you're at home and you're worried about something, write it down and put it in the box. And don't set an alarm, don't, put it in the calendar, just try and remember to worry about it at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening.
Okay.
And some kids are very conscientious and don't forget, which is fine, you can talk about it with them, but very often again they'll just forget about it and they say, look, you forgot about it. So you remember when we spoke about worrying being something that happened to you all the time and uncontrollable? It sounds like your mind is able to not be dragged down by it. So I tend to get adults not to write anything down and not give them an actual box, because it's like John Cleese said that his mother was a terrible worrier, so much so that she used to write down all her worries in case she forgot any of them.
Okay.
Which is not the
approach you're going for. Okay.
So, but from the carer's point of view, it might seem a strange thing, and maybe a little bit kind of, it's a bit strange. Why tell them to postpone the worry? It's not going to change anything, but it does, because it shows the individual that despite their feelings about it, worrying is controllable. You can't postpone it, and when you postpone it, you suddenly discover that the features of that worry are not what you thought they were. And
does meditation come into that
yes,
sort of activity
yes,
as well?
Absolutely. One of the things which you can do if the client is struggling to stop the what if chasing, what if I can't afford to pay for the holiday, what if the kids miss the bus coming home from school, is to have them engage in what we call mindful mundane tasks. So if you're doing the washing up, if you're doing gardening, doing painting, making food, whatever, to really, I won't say lose yourself, but to really use your 5 senses to monitor what it is you're doing right now. So the smell of the bacon as you're making it, the sizzle of the baking, which you can hear, the taste of it as you check whether it's done or not, the touch of the kitchen table, everything around you, just to anchor yourself in the present moment, can be a very powerful technique, because it's one of those things where if you're very expert at something, you do it every day, your mind's able to wander off, and it will wander off into your worry. And
you're trying to stop the mind having that space to wander and kind of ruminate.
Meditation is also something which is very powerful, and I think we should just focus on that for a little while. Mindful meditation is something which is much more common now in all different forms of therapy, and the idea is to try and become more mindful. What do we mean by that? Well, being mindful is really to be alert about the features of the present moment without becoming wrapped up in them completely, to be aware of that. I actually think it's a little bit more than that. I think the really important bit about mindfulness is to be able to notice yourself becoming more upset, becoming more anxious, becoming more angry sometimes. And it's mindfulness is when you're almost able to slow down psychological time. So things that were fleeting in a moment, automatic negative thoughts. For example, you might get an invitation to go and visit the grandchildren, and in an instant you say to yourself, I'm not great with children, when I'm like this, it'll be bad for them.
Yeah.
That really automatic thought, I'm a bad person, I'm not a worthwhile person, I'm not a happy person, I'm not a person who can be nice with children right now. That automatic thought comes, and immediately we feel sad. And at some point when we're really not at our best, we almost don't know that we've had that intermediate thought.
Yeah.
What we experience is, we'd like to go and see the grandchildren today, sadness. And mindfulness lets us see that little bit in the middle, that rapid, automatic, almost subconscious thought, I am not a person that they can love.
Okay.
Right? In other situations it might be, you see someone that you know walking down the other side of the street, and they're kind of in your line of vision, and they walk past you as they cross the zebra crossing, you cross the zebra crossing, and they don't acknowledge you at all, and you feel, weak and powerless and upset and rejected. What you don't see is that really quick little thought that says, that person doesn't like me,
Right.
Nobody likes me, I'm not worthy of people's concern, she's deliberately blanking me because of something I said yesterday. You might have some sense of those thoughts, but they happen so quickly that all you experience is a colleague walking past you and you feeling miserable and really down on yourself.
Okay. So if your loved one is using this exercise under a therapist or a counsellor, and they've been given it, what can you do to help support them in that activity?
Well, the first thing is to understand what the therapist is trying to do.
Okay.
Now, so mindfulness is about being alert to what's happening, and as I say, being alert to changes in mood caused by these rapid negative automatic thoughts. The meditation is the way you get mindfulness. The more meditation you do, the more mindful you will be in that sense. Now, a lot of people think that doing meditation is powerful because it calms you down, makes you feel more relaxed, and makes you feel kind of more at ease with the situation around you, maybe a bit more accepting. And that's true, but as I always say, that is the second most important thing about meditation.
Okay.
The most important thing is the way in which you are practicing managing your attention. So, just briefly, when you do, and there's all different types of meditation, and I know that you've had the experience of exploring different types of meditative practice. The kind that I use comes from the University of California Medical School.
Okay.
It's a tape that lasts 5 minutes, which is important because all the research suggests that it's better to do a small amount every day than to do large amounts.
So it's a guided meditation.
It's guided. You get it from a tape.
Yeah.
It's not a general, don't sit down and empty your mind.
Okay.
Very, very direct and very powerful. So the technique involves, first of all, getting the person to be physically comfortable, which also raises their awareness about their physical body and so on. Get them to close their eyes, get them to be alert to their contact with the chair and with the ground. So it just brings their attention to the body. That's fine. In some more elaborate forms of meditation, which I don't use my clients, you can get them to do a full body scan, go through every bit of their body, thinking about it a little bit, which is okay, but I think it's the longer you make it, the more likely the client won't do it. We'll keep it as short as possible while still being effective. So the focus initially is just on the simple bodily features of sitting in a chair in a room. Then it moves on to the breathing, and it asks you to be aware of the breathing and the rhythm of the breathing, just to focus on that. And then the most important bit comes after that. You're guided into recognizing that as you concentrate on your breathing, as your attention is on the air going in through your nose and out through your mouth, your attention will drift. You'll go and think about, why did I say that daft thing to that shopkeeper? What am I having for dinner tomorrow? Why didn't I apologise to my wife yesterday when she didn't do anything wrong, but I snapped? And the trick is to bring your attention back to the breathing. And indeed, some versions of this ask you to say to yourself, I'm drifting, and bring it back, just to mark that drifting. Now, the key thing in all of this is the fact that you are starting to exercise more control over your attention by allowing it to drift, but then bringing it back. So the way I kind of point this out to clients is, what's really happening here is you are seeing what your mind does on autopilot. And you know what? When you leave your mind to its own devices, it automatically drifts off into all your worries. It's focusing on regretting things that happened in the past and worrying about things that might happen in the future. The whole point is to try and bring your attention back to the here and now. And this is the thing. It's not about your mental health improving because you're thinking about your breathing all the time. There's nothing magical about breathing, though having good breathing is helpful. It's about the experience of seeing your attention wandering and then ushering it back to something else, you taking control. Fast forward to a situation where the person is crossing the zebra crossing again. You are alert now to what your mind does if you allow it to have its own way. Yeah? Now you don't want to over-dramatize this, but it's the idea of mindful meditation helps you practice and improve your attention muscle, if you want to call it that, so that, yes, you can be effective in meditation, but also, really crucially, when you're under pressure, when your mind has negative preconceptions, or you are fretful because you're seeing risk everywhere because you're anxious, or you've been fretting generally about things because you're chasing all these what's if, and some ambiguous stimulus comes to you, or some event you weren't expecting, or something you're only monitoring in the margins of your perspective, that you being alert to your mind drifting off into its automatic response, you are able to see that and say, stop, I am going to be mindful, I am going to be aware of the fact that I am creating this emotional reaction through particular thoughts, and I don't have to do that. I do have wiser choices. That person across the street might not have seen me. She might think I'm something else. She might think that I was ignoring her because I didn't speak to her either. It could be that she's thinking about, oh God, I forgot to buy milk, I'm going to have to go back. Who knows, right? And just being alert to the fact that your mind, when it works automatically, if you're not in a good place, will automatically drive forward the negatives. Just being aware of that and practicing through meditation about being alert to it and bringing your attention away from the automatic drifting and towards a more directed, mindful engagement with the here and now, that is a very, very powerful technique.
And one, and I very much agree that I think could be really powerful. I suppose kind of two observations, certainly based on my experience, is that there are different approaches to it, and sometimes if one approach doesn't work, it can be very easy for someone who's never encountered it to go, meditation doesn't work for me, because I tried that and it didn't work. There are a range of approaches, and even guided there's a whole range of guided meditation, there's a whole range of other ones, and just because the first one that they encountered doesn't necessarily work, maybe try something else, maybe try, and I know people that kind of the third or fourth different technique really clicked for them. And the other thing is that it's very much, I think it's very much like a muscle, that the first few times can be really difficult. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Certainly when I was meditating very, very regularly, it got to the stage of after a few months, I could kind of immediately, sort of within about 30 seconds or a minute, get into that kind of quite calm awareness space that when I first started might take me 5 minutes to get to, or 10 minutes. So, absolutely. And actually doing it with a loved one, it would probably be beneficial for yourself anyway. Of course, but it's so supportive to have someone else with you. It's much easier to do it with someone else than with someone else.
So other aspects of meditation are the fact that even very young kids can do it, and there are specialist books and directed tapes to help them do it. And very often these tapes can be done with a parent, and young people feel a very safe space to be meditating along with a mum or dad or carer, so that's quite a powerful aspect. It's also something which I find that if you do co-meditation, it is a chance for the couple to come together during the day. and it maybe could be after dinner or whenever. I do recommend to clients not to do meditation while they're still lying in bed, or they've just got up, or they've gone to bed, because in a way the mind needs to notice the difference. Yeah, and it's not just about...
and you can sometimes fall asleep.
You can, and that's actually an unsuccessful meditation rather than successful. It's not designed to make you sleepier, it's designed to make you alert and have your attention work in a slightly different way. Like you say, it's a muscle to be exercised, and so there's that. It's also a little bit like medication in as much as there are no side effects really at all. I mean, you might think a bit strange to meditate for 5 minutes a day if you're not used to that sort of thing, but the benefits of relaxation kick in quite quickly, because you do find you can relax with it, but the benefits around just being able to spot yourself drifting automatically into a certain emotion, because you're drifting automatically along with a particular kind of thought, that takes about maybe a week before it really kicks in, and it will only kick in a little bit initially. But the first time you realise, you don't think, oh my gosh, I've just realised that I've been thinking about what a bad person I am because my boss criticised my work, and that's what's made me angry. But I don't actually think I'm bad at this job. Where did that automatic thought come from? So you're not going to find a solution in that moment, but just being aware of the fact that what's happening is not event and emotion, it's event, thought and emotion. Is just a slowing down psychological time can be helped by mindful meditation. So that's the key thing there.
I hope you found this course helpful. At FCC, we're committed to providing courses and training for unpaid carers, and these courses are completely free. If you found this helpful, you could support our work in 3 ways. Please recommend it to any friends or people that you know that will benefit from the courses. Please consider sharing it on social media. And if you can, please consider donating. There are buttons on the website where you can donate £1, £2, £5, and every pound that you donate will make a huge difference by helping us make more and more care courses completely free to carers. Thank you very much.